It's widely agreed upon that the late 2000s and early 2010s were the absolute golden age of zombie media. And if you're like me and absolutely love zombies, then you know we were eating good, with us getting things like Plants vs. Zombies, The Walking Dead, both the game and TV show, World War Z, or, I don't know, Yakuza Dead Souls. But in my opinion, the real gem of the zombie craze back then was definitely Left 4 Dead. I think what really made the game stand out a lot in comparison to zombie media back then was just how different it felt in comparison to everything else that was coming out at the time. Everything from the unique storytelling techniques used, to the usage of Special Infected, which previously wasn't really seen outside of like Resident Evil. And when it comes to Special Infected in future zombie games, none of them are able to be nearly as fascinating as a Special Infected in Left 4 Dead. Well, maybe an exception can be made for Dead Island. The Special Infected in that series is pretty cool. The thing about the Special Infected in Left 4 Dead that makes him stand out a lot in comparison to other games of Special Infected is that you can infer a lot of things about the person the infected used to be just by their appearance and abilities. For example, with the Hunter, we can clearly tell he used to be someone that was extremely athletic and indulged a lot in parkour and freerunning based on his attire and ability to jump off a damn building onto the survivors. Another example we can use is that the Tank used to be a guy who likely worked out a lot. It may have also been on performance enhancers, which is implied with his insanely massive muscles and his notably higher level of aggression, even by infected standards. Despite in the short term these mutations give the infected an upper hand on the survivors, in the long term these mutations aren't very sustainable, which we can even see with all the Left 4 Dead 1 infected seen in Left 4 Dead 2. Take the Smoker for instance. In Left 4 Dead 1 we can see that the left side of his face and left arm were covered in small boils. But aside from that, his body looked relatively normal. But in Left 4 Dead 2, we can see that he's now absolutely covered in these boils, and more tongues are jutting out from them. And keep in mind, the events from Left 4 Dead 1 and Left 4 Dead 2 are really not that far apart from each other, which means that these changes couldn't have happened in any longer than the span of like 1 week. Now, imagine what would happen if they were given even more time to mutate. The Smoker would be an immobile mass of tumors, the Spitter would be nothing more than a molten puddle, the Charger would have died from exhaustion from all this fucking gooning. But what if with time, the Special Infected didn't die out from their mutations? What if, because of how volatile the green flu is, instead of dying out, the existing Special Infected evolved into stronger, more dangerous variations, lying in wait for the unaware humans who were trying to reclaim the United States? Today, let's revisit the CEDA Analog Horror series.
And after years of mutating and creating monstrosities never thought conceivably possible. Although unlike the Civil Emergency Defense Agency, we will not fail our mission. We will cure this infection, one wound at a time.
So, you all seem to really like my first video on the series, huh? I'm glad, because that means you all probably enjoyed the series as much as I do. But, in case this is your first time hearing about the series, then, 1, what the hell are you doing here? Go watch the series on your own before watching my video. Go on, I'll wait. Done watching it? Awesome. Then 2, let me give you all a refresher on the series. The CEDA Analog Horror series takes place in the Left 4 Dead universe after the events of Left 4 Dead 1, the Sacrifice comic, and Left 4 Dead 2, several years after the Left 4 Dead 2 survivors escaped New Orleans, where now, years later, the military and whatever's left of CEDA are trying to take back the United States and wipe out all the infected. The only issue being that because the United States have been left alone for so many years, it's given time for the infected to mutate even further than they had before, to the point where at least as far as we're aware for now, there's 3 new Special Infected variants, those being the Starer, the Whisperer, and Claws. Although the origins of these 3 Special Infected seem to be unknown, it's implied that the Starer seems to be related to the Smoker in some way, and Claws being some sort of mutation of the Starer, with the Whisperer seeming to be a common infected who's gained or retained some form of sentience. Although all 3 of these infected variants are important in their own ways, the one that's most notable for now is the Whisperer. Pretty much all Whisperers use their sentience for malicious purposes, where they pretend to be a survivor to lure people into their hiding spots to attack them. But you might have noticed I said pretty much all Whisperers instead of all Whisperers. As far as we're aware, only one Whisperer has been known to be at least a little bit passive, that being the infected CEDA doctor, Sebastian Kingsman. Although he did jump scare the fuck out of us in the Door installment, he's apparently been captured by the military and has agreed to cooperate with them. Another one of these 3 infected variants that are worth bringing up is the Claws variant. This infected variant's only been spotted once, and that was inside Liberty Mall, where after it game-ended 2 soldiers who snuck in, managed to shred through nearly 20 soldiers who were sent in to clear the mall. Meanwhile, we learned the Left 4 Dead 2 survivors have taken on special roles in the military, most notable of whom being Rochelle, Nick, and Ellis, who seem to be doing field work in the US. Where Ellis receives some kind of injury, Rochelle is presumably deployed to the sugar mill in hard rain to clear it out, and Nick is assigned to travel to Newburgh, the burning city from dead air. As for the Left 4 Dead 1 survivors, for now, the only one we know of is Zoe, who for one reason or another has returned to the US. And that takes us to now, with, as of recording this, 4 new installments and a whole bunch of secrets scattered around. Though, of all the secrets, there's one secret that really scares me. And that's that you haven't subscribed yet! Woo! Woo! You want to subscribe so badly! Okay, but seriously, please do subscribe. I'm trying to hit 100k subscribers before the end of 2026. Anyways, enjoy the video. Oh, also consider being a channel member to see videos early and get access to exclusive behind-the-scenes videos and silly chill gaming videos, thanks. Now, before I get into new installments, I want to first take the time to correct all my screw-ups from my first video on the series. So, the first thing I'd like to correct is... Okay! I get it! Those URL chunks are 2 halves of a URL! I know I'm dumb! You can stop telling me how obvious it is now! Please! Now, I would showcase what the video is, but unfortunately, it got privated by the creator. Now, the next thing I want to address is something I initially wasn't going to bring up because it was ultimately a very minimal detail, but I've seen a lot of comments calling me wrong for a comment I made about the safe room door being broken down in the door tape. And in response, I just wanted to say, I am not wrong! You are the wrong ones! Yes, I am very much well aware that tanks can break down safe room doors. Or rather, they can break down the safe room doors you exit from, not the ones you enter. It totally makes sense that they can break down the exit door, cause just look how flimsy this door is. No shit a tank can bash that down. But as we can see in the door tape, it was the entrance door that got broken down, which, in comparison to the exit doors, the safe room entrance doors are clearly way more sturdy. But more importantly, tanks can't bash them down. Once again, commenters get obliterated by my facts and logic. Now, another thing I want to bring up is actually something I'm really glad one of you pointed out. Because when I wanted to check for myself to see if you guys were right, I got the craziest chill down my spine. I'm of course talking about the secret Vanna ground floor video. Remember when I said that I couldn't see anything in this video? Yeah, I'm blind. Do you see it? There on the right is almost 100% a starer just fucking lurking. I know I glaze the series super hard, but details like this are what really makes me enjoy this analog horror series so much. The creators made a very important point in the series that the stare is an insanely stealthy infected, and scenes like this really drive home just how sneaky the stare is. It has such an imposing frame, yet I somehow didn't see it until some keen-eyed viewers pointed out to me in the comments. And actually, while we're talking about the stare, let's talk about the other supposed stare I never saw that was hiding in plain sight. And the one I'm talking about is of course the stare hiding in the safe room. I keep trying to see what some of you have been pointing out, and I still just for the life of me can't see anything that looks like a stare. I mean, I can kinda see what some of you are saying is a glowing eye, but I think that's just a source engine texture giving some of you pareidolia. Now, to shift things a bit away from the stare, there's something else I want to discuss I only remembered after scrolling the comps to create this segment, and that's Payday 2. Wait, what? Yeah, Payday 2. If you can believe it, Payday 2 has a Left 4 Dead mission, where you have to steal a blood sample from patient 0 of the green flu. And for some reason, a lot of you are under the impression this is canon to the Left 4 Dead universe. And by extension, canon to the CEDA series. The thing is, though, I'm like 99% certain that this isn't the case. First and foremost, I'm pretty sure I remember hearing somewhere that either someone from Valve or Overkill that this mission isn't even canon. And even if I'm totally hallucinating, we can still logically deduce that this can't be canon because of a few small details and Easter eggs. Yes, I know Easter eggs are rarely ever canon, but still. Now, speaking of Easter eggs, let's start with the first and weakest piece of evidence this mission isn't canon, and that's the witch Easter egg. Supposedly, this mission takes place before the widespread outbreak of the green flu, and yet somehow there's a special infected that didn't even show up until 2 weeks after the first infection in this broom closet. But even if we ignore this Easter egg and write it off as a silly little secret, one thing that's a bit more concrete is the appearance of Bill. See, we know that on the second day of the outbreak, Bill was at the Veterans Hospital, a location distinctly different from Mercy Hospital, where he was getting ready for surgery. Now, of course, this is totally speculative, and maybe I'm totally wrong in my analysis, but we know that Bill's first run-in with the infected was on the second day of the first reported infection. Now, in the Payday 2 mission, it's probably day 1 or maybe even day 2 of the first reported infection, and we see Bill here is almost definitely here for a simple routine checkup. To me, he doesn't exactly look like he's getting ready for his surgery that would theoretically be taking place within the next 24 to 48 hours from now. But what do I know? I'm not a doctor. Oh, also, the creator of the series says that Payday isn't canon to the universe, so... Lastly, I want to address a couple small screw-ups on my end. First of which being me not realizing this phone number isn't real. A lot of you in the comments have enlightened me that when a phone number has 555, it means that's a fake number. Which, by the way, now that I know this, whenever I see a 555 number anywhere in media, my immersion gets instantly obliterated because I immediately clock it every single time. Now, another small screw-up I want to address is the jumbled text here. Though, really, I think it's a screw-up on everyone's end. See, the jumbled text in the evacuation protocols is nearly impossible to decipher, and everyone seems to have different theories on what the text here could be saying. Though, a lot of you think it's, "there's no escape." And although I see where you guys are coming from with this theory, I honestly think this is just a bit of a coincidence, and that it's just jumbled text for the sake of being creepy, and all of you are actually just experiencing
Apophenia.
Yeah, that word. Now, before we get into the main meat and potatoes of the series, I want to briefly return to Sebastian Kingsman channel, as there's one new video on there, that being Blackout. This video opens with text from Sebastian, where he contextualizes that the footage we're seeing is from 15 minutes before a blackout. Now, initially, I thought this blackout was at the Annex Finance building, as that's where Sebastian was in his previous videos, but the description actually states that this blackout happened at Mercy Hospital. Anyways, shockingly, after this footage of a woman sitting on a bed, we're then shown footage from 2 minutes after the blackout, where we see that within that time frame, the woman has already become infected and turned. Curiously, this infected seems abnormally smart, as she seems to take notice of the camera in her room. This could mean that she's become a whisperer. We're then shown text that's way more cryptic, and that's just a single word, leak. After that, we're then shown what I think is confirmation of my theory that she's a whisperer, and that's a very low res image of a face in a dark room or hallway. And with that, the video ends. For a Sebastian Kingsman video, this one has a surprising amount of things to analyze in comparison to other videos on here like Infomercial Talk or Mustard. First things first, let's talk about this insane infection speed. Admittedly, there isn't much to analyze in terms of this, as it's common knowledge that the time it takes to turn varies a lot. But even still, 2 minutes to be infected, barf up blood, and shamble around? That's actually insane to me. Okay, but to actually analyze this video, let's talk about this cryptic text that says leak. There's a whole lot of things this could be referring to, and I have 2 likely theories on what it could be. My first theory is that leak is in reference to after the power went out, the green fluid leaked in floors and rooms with uninfected people, such as this woman's room. My second theory is that leak is referring to the image right after the text appearing on screen, that being what's most likely a whisperer lurking in the darkness. Upon further inspection of this image, I can see what looks like an open door, which almost definitely means that the whisperer is in a hallway. We know that whisperers are smart, which means this infected may have left her room during the blackout, causing green fluid to leak out into the rest of the hospital. And while we're on the topic of the whisperer, let's also discuss this huge elephant in the room. That being the fact that this implies that the whisperers have theoretically been around since day 1 of the outbreak. I'm not really sure why, but there's something just so creepy to me about knowing that theoretically, there's been a special infected variant that's been lurking around all throughout the Left 4 Dead 1 and 2 campaigns that the survivors never encountered because of just how smart and sneaky it is. It does sort of make sense though the Whisperer was shown up on day 1 of the outbreak. As of all the special infected, it's the least outwardly mutated special infected variant, as it's really just a common infected who's retained their intelligence. But I think that's all I have to analyze for Blackout. I know it was kind of short despite me saying there's a lot to analyze, but that's just in comparison to the other Sebastian Kingsman videos, which are primarily just videos for world building. Now, let's return to the main channel and see just how bad things are getting for the military. Let's start with where we left off last time, with a continuation of the Liberty Mall saga, that being Liberty Escape. This installment opens with a brand new intro, where we see brief shots from each plotline, those being Liberty Mall, the Starers and Claws, Sebastian Kingsman, and Nick's mission. Once this intro finishes playing, we then see an announcement from Rochelle, who explains she's about to show body cam footage recovered from one of the 20 soldiers sent to clear Liberty Mall, whose name is Malik Summers. This footage opens with a much more clear shot of what the infected behind the boxes looks like. And god damn! Something I absolutely love about this series is just how unsettling the creator makes the infected look. Anyways, this tape then reiterates info that we already know, that being how Claws wiped out nearly half the soldiers sent into the mall, and how not much is known about it. We then see a freeze frame of a soldier trying to fight off a starer. Actually, come to think of it, I'm pretty sure this is the clearest we see of a starer so far. After this freeze frame, we finally get to see the recovered body cam footage, where we learn that of all the soldiers, Malik chose to hide. In this footage, we see immediately the soldiers aren't just getting overwhelmed by claws and stairs. We also see there's what seems to be common infected swarming the soldiers too. Well, either that, or this infected is yet another variant that we don't know about. Anyways, as Malik is hiding, we then see Claws walk into his hiding spot, slowly looking around. And holy shit, that's creepy! Malik then pulls the pin on his last stun grenade, where like for 3 frames as the grenade explodes, we can see both Malik's absolutely mangled hand, but also very clearly what Claws looks like. And good God! We then see him making a mad dash to the auditorium safe room while being chased by Claws, where, thankfully, Malik makes it safely. As Claws tries to bash down the door, we see that Malik attempts to contact the emergency hotline, where he demands that Rochelle send in reinforcements. But, in classic bureaucratic fashion, Rochelle denies his request, and instead instructs him to make it to the main entrance where he'll be evacuated. After taking a moment to rest, Malik continues on, where he can hear Claws continue bashing into the safe room door. Malik then yaps to himself for a brief moment before stumbling across the body of a CEDA agent, where he reveals just how much disdain he has for CEDA and their policy of not harming the infected. As he keeps ranting to himself, he stumbles upon another Claws. So this definitely means that the one Claws that took down 8 of the soldiers wasn't just a one-off instance. Thankfully, this Claws doesn't take note of him, and he sneaks past it. Or at least, that's what he thought, as it ends up following him. Interestingly, as Malik is getting chased by Claws, we see a sight that seems a little familiar, at least to me. This light at the end of the hallway. I could easily be reading way too into this, but if you remember from way back when, back to the original Vanna installment, there's a weirdly out of place section in the evacuation protocols. Let me play the clip real quick for you.
If this evacuation center is too crowded for your liking, there is another evacuation center at Liberty Mall. To do circumstances rapidly escalating in these uncertain times, don't hold off on visiting the centers. If things escalate, we don't know how long these centers will take any more people. If you are infected, or if you think you are, we advise you to distance yourselves from others. Make your way to one of the centers, and announce your possible infection. We will take the proper amount of precautions to take you in, and attempt to treat you. These are really uncertain times, but with your help and cooperation, a bright light is surely at the end of this.
Now, my thought process here is that the hallway Malik is writing down is related in some way to this random ass hallway, as both this evacuation protocols video takes place at Liberty Mall, and Malik is currently trying to escape Liberty Mall. So maybe that means these two videos are connected in some way. Maybe the specific hallway holds some kind of particular significance? Or maybe I'm once again focusing on absolutely nothing. After all, the Vanna tape is one of the oldest installments that's apparently due for a remake. So maybe that hallway in that tape is completely irrelevant now. Anyways, focusing on a random ass hallway aside, as Malik is running down the hallway, he trips, thus sealing his fate. After the scene cuts to black, we see what definitely looks like a chunk of a URL in the captions. Though, curiously, it's missing 2 characters. In this black screen, we see Malik and Claws fade on screen, where we see just what happened to Malik. I know for a fact YouTube won't be happy with me showing this, so if you want to see the gory aftermath of Claws' attack on him, again, you should definitely watch this on your own. Anyways, after Malik's mangled face turns red and shakes aggressively, we see some text from the military, where it states that the evac team waited for 13 hours for Malik to come out. An unknown narrator from the military then summarizes the situation with Claws in Liberty Mall, where we get to see a full silhouette of what Claws looks like. And good lord, I still just can't get over how off-putting this thing looks. This narrator then comes up with a theory of the origin of Claws, that being that it's a mutation of the stare, though because of its claws, I personally can't help but feel like it's related to the witch in some way. But that's a topic for later. This installment then ends with an interesting note about how actually there's only one instance of Claws in the mall. So that means that the Claws that Malik escaped from the first time around was the same one that got him in the end. With that, the tape ends. Okay, let's just real quick give a moment of silence for Malik. Big Dog was so close to surviving, but ended up suffering the typical horror trope of tripping and falling. This tape was definitely very fascinating, as we finally get to see an extended encounter with the Claws special infected. Though before I discuss his encounter with Claws, I want to quickly take note of something that probably went over a lot of people's heads, unless you're like me, and obsess over every small detail in the series. And this detail in question is... Rochelle? Yeah, Rochelle. See, the video opens with Rochelle prefacing the footage that makes up most of this video, where she states that she's an official of the head of communications. Now, that makes sense given that she has a background in news, but I want to direct your attention way back to the hidden video in the authorized tape, West Bank. If you remember, in the description it says what the current duties are for the Left 4 Dead 2 survivors. And for Rochelle, it says she's clearing what I presume is a witch hive in Milltown. Now, what I find so strange about this is that in this tape, we can clearly see that Rochelle's been given a safe desk job. So then why is it that she's now seemingly being taken away from this relatively cushy job to now risk being torn limb from limb in Milltown? There honestly isn't too much for me to speculate on in regards to this. The most I can come up with is that she herself isn't going to be on the front lines clearing it out, but rather she's just going to be in charge of communications. After all, if Milltown's referring to the sugar mill in Hard Rain, then that might mean she'll be guiding the soldiers through the mill over comms, as she's been through the mill before. But that's enough about the worst Left 4 Dead survivor. Let's discuss the real star of the show here, this unholy thing. In this tape, we finally get to properly see what Claus looks like, outside of that one creepy-ass still shot from the Claus tape. And frankly, this unholy creature somehow looks freakier than it did back in the Claus tape. I know I already said this earlier, but I really just need to take a moment to mention how much I just love how the creator manages to make the infected look as creepy as possible. Like dude, when I saw the high resolution shot of Claus hiding behind the boxes, I felt the craziest chill down my spine. Something about the way it's shaped combined with its total stillness and a lot of its details being obscured by the darkness, it's just, so creepy. But I'm getting sidetracked. Spooky appearance aside, I'm going to be Captain Obvious for a moment here and discuss something very notable here. And that of course being just how intelligent Claus clearly is. Like, duh, no kidding it's smart. But this thing is definitely a special kind of smart. What's my proof of this? Well, towards the end of the footage from Malik's body cam, we can see that right before Claus continues pursuing Malik, it tricked him into thinking that it didn't notice him. And as I was rewatching the section, you can actually see it was staring directly at Malik until he zoomed his camera in, where it then started to pretend to eat a body. So we know that not only is Claus intelligent, but it also seems to like to toy with its prey. We know from the end of the tape that Claus has a lot of similar behaviors to the stairs, and there's only one instance of Claus in the mall. So that has to mean that sometime in between Malik entering that safe room and spotting Claus again, it found Malik, stalked him in the shadows, and then positioned itself somewhere where Malik could see him. And actually, while we're on the topic of Claus having similarities to the stairs, let's talk about some of the possibilities on what exactly Claus is. Now, both at the end of this tape and the Claus video, it's theorized that Claus is a mutation of a stair. And while yes, that could totally be true, I can't help but feel a bit skeptical of this theory. And I have a theory of my own that I personally think could be just as likely as the theory that Claus are mutated stairs. My theory is that Claus isn't a mutation of the stair, but rather it's a mutation of the witch. Now, I could just leave that theory there and call it a day, because it makes plenty of sense on its own. But let me justify it a bit. I believe that stairs could be mutations of smokers. If you remember way back in the Better Safe Than Sorry tape, there's a page of information about the stairs at the beginning. And then at the end, there's a dead smoker with a description of a smoker in the captions, which I think is implying that stairs are mutated smokers. And it totally would make sense if this is the case. Half of the stair's body and face is disfigured, much like the smoker. And the stair also likes to keep its distance, much like the smoker. In fact, it could maybe be argued that the reason why the stairs are partially disfigured is because that's where the smoker's gross pustules were, and they sort of like deflated or something. Though, admittedly, the smoker theory would then be contradicting the whole stairs or reanimated dead bodies theory that I had in the last video, which would then raise a question of what the hell the deal is with this infected that came back to life in the trainee tape. So maybe I'm totally wrong with this theory on the stairs being mutated smokers. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. But what does this theory have to do with Claus? Well, if in theory stairs came from smokers, then Claus could come from witches. But then this doesn't explain why Claus has such similar behaviors as stairs if they stem from two different special infected. Except we're ignoring a key detail here. Claus is insanely smart. Is it too far-fetched to assume that maybe Claus simply picked up these habits of the stairs by observing them for long enough? Or hell, maybe the stairs even taught Claus how to hunt like them. We know that stairs are smart enough to form colonies with social structures. And we also know that the stairs and Claus were working alongside each other to ambush the team sent to clear Liberty Mall. So it's totally within the realm of possibility that the stairs taught Claus their ways. Plus, I find it really odd that Claus looks nothing like the stairs at all. It's taller, shaped differently, and it doesn't have any of the disfigurements the stairs have. Plus, we can't just ignore its claws, which are identical to the witch's claws. However, playing devil's advocate here, I can see the logic behind Claus being a mutation of the stairs. Primarily, the fact is the only instance of Claus ever discovered, which happened to be in a location chock full of stairs. But can you blame me for feeling like Claus being a mutation of a stair doesn't really feel right? I mean, literally the only similarity between the two special infected variants are their hunting habits. But who knows? Only time can tell just what exactly the Claus and stairs come from. So let's move on to the next tape, that one being Special Infected. This tape opens with an updated version of the previous tape's intro, this time showing a shambling common infected, a full shot of the infected Sebastian Kingsman, an older Ellis standing next to Nick, and both the Left 4 Dead 1 and Left 4 Dead 2 survivors being overlaid on the CEDA logo. After this intro, we see this is a more traditional tape, where, as one could guess, it's about the special infected in the modern era. we also see this tape was made by a new organization, WAGE. What this name stands for, I'm not sure yet, though the text in the bottom left states that WAGE is working alongside CEDA. We then see a preface to this tape that explains this tape will be going over the types of special infected that are all over the quote, new world. Before it then hey wait, what the hell is that? Oh hey look, a partial YouTube URL. In the next section of the tape, it explains what's become the special infected that we all know and love, where we learn that they're now labeled as legacy special infected. The biggest thing to note here about them is that hardly any of them exist now, as their mutations were too taxing on their bodies, and the few that are still around are either on death's door or qualify to be labeled as a new world variant. After this section on legacy special infected, we then switch from the special infected tape to a tape from CEDA, where we finally get some information on the safe room door from the door tape. The first thing this tape takes note of are the journal entries, where the survivors, Winston and Amy, would write various entries leading up to the day where their safe room was breached. The first entry was about how they heard that armed forces are back in the US. The second entry being about how, to their shock, CEDA was shooting carriers. But the bigger thing to note here is that they write about how they hear a whisperer calling for help, and how they hope that some unknown infected doesn't wake up from these cries for help. The last entry we see is the most ominous of them all, where it simply states that the meatwall is awake and it can smell them. We then see footage recorded from Winston as the meatwall tries to get into the safe room, where Amy arms herself with a measly pistol. And as the meatwall is about to breach the safe room, we see just for a couple frames what the meatwall looks like. And to be honest, I was kind of expecting it to look as grotesque as like claws or something. I definitely wasn't expecting it to be a slightly bigger tank. But in a sense, I think there's still something quite scary about a tank that's slightly bigger and stronger than what we're used to. And hell, when you really stop and think about it, the tank by itself is also a pretty damn spooky special infected. Like, just stop for a moment and imagine how horrifying it would be to be confronted by like an 8-foot tall, 500-pound ball of muscle and rage in a small confined room. That shit would be a total nightmare. But I'm getting sidetracked. After this footage, we return to narration from the unknown CEDA agent, where they imply that Amy and Winston were both carriers, and the carriers in the US don't know anything about the status of the old world. This tape then ominously states that it's good that the carriers don't know anything about the old world, before switching back to the special infected tape, which is now discussing the Whisperer. This section of the Whisperer partially explains the details we were already familiar with from the door tape, but it also contextualizes the Whisperer as effectively just a carrier who will go feral if they don't eat for a long period. Wait, isn't that just the ghouls from Tokyo Ghoul? After this description of a Whisperer, the scene then changes to this creepy-ass shot of a hallway, with safety precautions on how to deal with Whisperers. And when you listen closely, you can even hear what I'm pretty sure is a Whisperer talking. After these safety precautions, we then see a description of the stair, which by now we're already very well aware of, before recapping the 3 stalking states that the stairs have in what seems to be the same hallway from earlier. Also, we get to see the stairs in action here too. Lovely! And good lord, the creator really knows how to make these freaks look scary. I felt just so damn unsettled when those 2 other eyes emerged from the dark. Also, hey look, another URL! We then return to the description of the stair, where we learn a detail that I don't think we knew before, that being that they're photosensitive and are afraid of water. Suddenly, the scene then switches to a heavily distorted section of the tape discussing claws, though this also recaps all the information on claws that we're already well aware of. The last section of this tape discusses a previously seen special infected, the Meatwall, which is classified as a tank variant. According to this tape, the Meatwall is essentially just a tank that learned to calm the hell down, and has gained self-preservation instincts. One of the key traits about the Meatwall is that they tend to hibernate, causing them to block hallways with their sheer mass. The tape then further explains some details to show that the Meatwall is a shockingly smart special infected variant, in distinctly different ways than the other New World special infected. The biggest things to note is that the Meatwall tries to conserve as much energy as possible, even going as far as stop its pursuit if it deems chasing after someone to be a net loss in energy. The last line on this page really sticks out to me though, and that says it's the only special infected that'll eat other infected if it gets desperate enough. This stands out to me primarily because of the wording that says it's one of the only special infected that do this. Does this mean that there's other special infected variants that we still aren't aware of yet that do this? I guess only time can tell. Also, here we see another chunk of a URL. We then cut to another CEDA tape, where it goes over what the Left 4 Dead 2 survivors are up to now. For Nick, we get a proper answer as to why he's looking at a staticky TV. That being that he was watching all the tapes this whole time. Honestly, I feel a bit stupid for not realizing that earlier. For Rochelle, we see that she is in fact getting sent to Milltown, presumably to help clear out the sugar mill. For Coach, we learn something that I feel is a bit alarming, and that's that he's being sent to Switzerland for a diplomatic meeting. Right, because I'm sure it's such an amazing idea to send a carrier of a disease that made the entire United States uninhabitable to an uninfected country. Surely this won't cause the whole world to collapse or anything like that, right? And lastly, we finally get an answer to that cryptic status that we saw earlier that said Ellis's quote, recovering encounter. Although I initially thought that it could mean that he might be recovering something he encountered, it actually means he's recovering from something he encountered. And we actually get to see what the said incident was. Apparently, Ellis and his unit were sent to clear out the riverside drainage system, and when they lost contact with a small group in the drainage system, Ellis went in alone after them. We then finally see what it was that Ellis encountered. It was a meat wall. I mean, come on! All the signs were there that Ellis was probably going to run into a meat wall. When Ellis encountered the meat wall, it was actually hibernating. However, a common infected spotted Ellis, and in his infinite wisdom, him and his loudmouth pulled a gun and shouted, thus waking the meat wall. Curiously, despite seemingly being a common infected, when the meat wall wakes up, this infected actually seems scared shitless, causing Ellis to be confused. Only when he turns back to the meat wall does he realize his mistake. We then see a fight break out between Ellis and the meat wall. Curiously, I think we can see another detail on how the meat wall is smarter than the other infected. That being how after it launches Ellis, instead of pursuing him, it screams to summon the horde to fight Ellis. Presumably so it doesn't have to fight him more than it already has, so it can conserve energy. After this fight, we learn that somehow Ellis managed to survive this horde despite being unarmed and being swarmed by the infected. Now that he's recovered, we learn that he's now been reassigned to Fairfield, presumably filling in for Nick now that he's been sent to Newburgh. With that, the episode ends. But before we get into analyzing this tape, there's still a couple hidden URLs scattered throughout this video that we still need to go over. The first of which being Gleaming Premonition. This video isn't really the most noteworthy, as it's just a still shot of the Mercy Hospital sign being overgrown, with text that just says Nest at the bottom. Actually, I think this text might be the same mysterious gray text I've noticed seeing in previous installments. I know damn well that this unknown gray text person holds some sort of significance. And I know I'm not crazy. I even asked the creator flat out for an answer on who this is, and all I got was this in response. Anyways, the real thing to note here in this video is the description, which appears to be a conversation between two people about Mercy Hospital, and how it's completely infested with stairs. Although we don't know the identity of one of these people in the conversation, we do know that the other person is someone that will presumably be sent to Mercy Hospital to clear it out. So could this person maybe be Ellis then, since he's being sent to Fairfield? I do have some more speculation on Mercy Hospital, but I want to save that for the analysis section. So let's move on to the other hidden video, that one being Rest. Although this video arguably has even less going on with it, this one's even more cryptic. This video is just a still shot of Bill's body in the generator room, with a URL chunk in the top left corner, and the cryptic gray text returning once again, just stating that the second half of the URL will show itself in the future, and we'll know when to return to this video. Yeah, that's really all there is to this video, so let's analyze this loaded installment. So this installment definitely had a lot to unpack. So let's start off by bringing up the newest organization in the series, Wage. Or I guess it's not exactly a new organization, it's more just we're finally given a name to the military group that's been clearing out the US. Up until now, I've just been assuming this group is simply just CEDA, or remnants of the US military. I suppose in a sense they are, but regardless, I think now that we know that Wage is neither CEDA nor the US military, it can help us understand them a little bit better. And what I mean by that is we already generally know what the motivations of CEDA and the US military are, so knowing that Wage is neither of these organizations, that also by extension means their goals and motivations don't necessarily align with either organization. Though we kinda could already gauge that, given that they're hellbound clearing out the US, including both the carriers and the infected. Of course, this isn't to say that CEDA doesn't exist at all anymore. In fact, they're even working alongside Wage. This just raises a bit of a big question for me though. If CEDA still exists as its own organization instead of being part of Wage, then that means that CEDA has their own agenda and goals. But then, what are these goals and agendas? We know their goals at least partially aligns with Wage, given how they show some form of relief over the carriers in the US not knowing about the quote, old world being intact. But we also know the CEDA isn't exactly hellbent on ending the carriers, given that Nick has been reassigned to go to Newburgh to reason with the carriers. And also, they've captured Sebastian Kingsman to interrogate him. I suppose for now, only time can tell. Now, something else I want to discuss is the big elephant in the room. Or rather, the big tank in the room. I'm of course talking about the meat wall. Throughout this tape, we've been given quick glances of what the meat wall looks like leading up to the final sequence of Ellis finding the meat wall in Riverside. And, truth be told, when I saw this episode premiere, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't at least a little bit disappointed by how this is just a heavily scarred tank. However, after taking some time to think about things a bit, I realized that logically, it makes perfect sense that the meat wall is just a very EP tank. Let me explain. So obviously the creator of the series watched WoW Gaming's video on the fate of the infected in the Left 4 Dead universe, and how unsustainable each infected's mutations are. Of note, the tank is in a perpetual state of rage and movement, which would either make it lose its muscles pretty easily due to wasting of calories, or cause it to just straight up have a heart attack. So the only real logical solution here to keeping a tank alive for several years on end would be to 1, have it eat whatever it can, including infected, and 2, having it learn to calm the hell down and to perpetually be in calorie preservation mode, i.e. hibernating. And given these tanks seem to be smart enough to give up on prey that isn't worth pursuing, as well as specifically falling asleep in hallways, we can tell that instead of mutating physically to be better killing machines like claws, the tanks that didn't atrophy or have their hearts fail on them instead had some sort of brain mutation like the Stairs or Whisperers, so that they're much smarter and calmer. After all, tanks on their own are already perfectly capable of taking down whoever they please, so any physical mutations would be kinda redundant. And this is another reason why I feel like Claws could be a witch mutation. Well yes, unlike the Meatwall, Claws looks more like a Fallout 3 Mirelurk King with long nails instead of a witch. These drastic physical mutations make a lot more sense to me. See, if we were to assume that all the infected eat, then arguably, right next to the Spitter and Boomer, the witch would be kinda screwed. And I'm not just talking about her severe lack of body fat. No. I just mean after a couple days, they probably wouldn't be able to get their claws on anyone anymore, because all the surviving carriers would be wise to their tricks, and her siren call wouldn't lure them in anymore. So logically, they'd kinda have to evolve to be a lot more aggressive if they were gonna survive. And I'm assuming that since claws is such a rare variant, they only come to exist if a witch somehow goes long enough without starving to death, she can evolve into this Mirelurk King looking freak. While we're on the topic of the infected, I want to bring up a small detail I thought was a bit interesting. In the section discussing how to deal with stairs, it mentioned the stairs are particularly afraid of water. This perfectly aligns with the unknown narrator from the Green Flu tape, who couldn't drink water and is heavily implied to have turned into a stair if we decide not to game end him. Now, we know that hydrophobia is a symptom of rabies, but it's already established in the quarantine tape that the Green Flu is not a form of rabies whatsoever. So then that raises a bit of a question. Is hydrophobia a symptom of being a starer, or is it implying that the Green Flu is some sort of genetically modified virus that uses aspects of rabies? Again, only time can tell. And while we're on the topic of stairs, let's briefly discuss a Gleaming Premonition video. Obviously, Mercy Hospital will be packed to the brim with stairs, but let's be so for real. There's gonna be way more than just stairs in that building. The only question is, what else will be in there? I really wouldn't be surprised if there's multiple claws in there. Maybe even a meat wall or two. But there's no way it's just going to be that in there. I strongly believe there's going to be another mutated special infected in there. But if that's the case, what would it be a derivative of? Lastly, to add on to my speculation, let's quickly talk about the rest video. Although this video is uneventful, I feel like Bill's body will hold some sort of relevance. I'm just worried that this relevance in question could be the confirmation that the stairs are bodies that have come back to life. Like, honestly, how messed up would it be if Bill were to become a starer? So, here's hoping it's not that. The more important thing I want to discuss here is this gray text. Look, I know I'm not overanalyzing things when I harp on this seemingly small detail. This text has been recurring all throughout the series since the very first tape, and I know it's not a stylistic choice, because it's so distinctly different than the rest of the texts that we see in the tapes. So then, who the hell is this gray text narrator? So many questions, so little answers. Hopefully in the next tape we get some answers. So let's move on to the next tape, The Door Remake. Not even 1 second into this video, we see a quick flash that shows both the CEDA logo and also what WAGE stands for. That being the World Alliance for Green Flu Eradication. Wait, wouldn't that make WAGE WAGFI? Also, we find out that CEDA isn't working with WAGE, but actually WAGE is working in cooperation with CEDA. You might think that this is the same thing, but linguistically it's not. Not to turn all English teacher on all of you, but the word cooperation here means that WAGE is complying with or adhering to CEDA's goals while working alongside them. Now, you might be wondering why this matters at all. Well, the reason why I find this to be so important is that this means that CEDA are the ones calling the shots, and by extension, they're the organization with more power and authority. This then raises the question of how exactly did CEDA manage to get in such a position that they have more authority over World Alliance organization, especially after how horribly they handled the early days of the Green Flu outbreak. Okay, that's enough of me reading way too into a single word. Because this is a remake of an existing installment, this tape is generally similar to the original Door installment. One big thing to note is that the tape contextualizes that the marking of the various points of interest were done by WAGE instead of some mysterious unknown organization. Much like in the original Door tape, the first POI is the rooftop safe room. However, instead of it being simply marked as a quote, potential safe room, it's now called an exterminated safe room. Also, unlike the original video where this location was not that interesting whatsoever, we get to see body cam footage of the WAGE soldiers exploring the building. As the soldier's wandering around through the safe room, he comes across Nick and a soldier having a conversation, which we can barely hear. They absolutely are saying proper sentences, and I can definitely pick out the soldier saying all carriers have been neutralized in the safe room, but maybe it's because I'm hard of hearing, but I can't really discern anything else either of them are saying. So if you're able to figure out what they're saying, please give me the transcript in the comments down below. After this conversation, we see a URL in the captions. We'll get to that later. We then get a summary of what went down in the safe room. And disturbingly, we get to see how evil Wage actually is. As it turns out, Wage massacred the safe room of 17 carriers and, quote, handled accordingly a carrier that was hiding in a tub. I mean, yeah, I kinda already figured this was their goal this whole time, to game end every and all carriers in the US. But still, jeez. And wow, okay, way to drive home the fact that you guys are the villains here. They are trying to hide from us? Wow, gee, I wonder why. And just to really drive home the fact these guys are the bad guys, we then see one more shot from their body cam, where we see the bodies of these carriers, and given the location of their bodies and blood splatters on the wall, it's giving me the impression they're lined up against the wall before being executed. After the sequence showcasing the war crimes Wage enacted, we then get to see our second point of interest, that being the compromised safe room. Here, we hear narration from a soldier, where he pretty much reiterates my theories and questions I posed in my previous video on the series, wondering what could have done this, and that had to have been a special infected who did this. Though, as we already know from the special infected tape, this was because of the meat wall. After this narration, we see a lingering shot of the dark doorway of the safe room, and another URL is given to us in the captions. Once again, we'll return to this later. After showcasing the compromised safe room, we then get shown the third point of interest. Though, instead of it being called The Whisperer, this is just simply called Encounter. We're then shown a close-up shot of a Wage soldier, Elijah Torres, before getting a description of the incident that occurred at this point of interest, where his squadron was clearing a location before Elijah broke off from the group to investigate calls for help. We're then shown body cam footage of this encounter taking place, where we hear the Whisperer, presumably Sebastian Kingsman, manipulating Elijah into opening the door. And, much like in the original video, we get absolutely fucking jump scared by the Whisperer in this room, arguably in a much scarier fashion than the original. Right as this tape is about to end, for the last half second, we get one last URL in the captions. So with that, let's get checking out these 3 URLs we were given throughout the tape. For the first of the 3 videos we were given, we have Sergeant. This video is fairly uneventful, mostly consisting of Nick looking at one of the executed carriers, almost with what kinda seems like a look of shame. Also, I know I might be reading a bit too into this, but I find it curious that the shot of the dead carrier focuses on only half of his face. I wonder if this could be implying they could come back from the dead as a starer. I know it's pure speculation, stairs are dead people that come back to life, but I don't know. I'm still thinking about that body that woke up in the trainee tape, though that's also a tape that's going to be remastered next. So this scene could be very much retconned out of the series, so who knows. Anyways, aside from that, there's not too much else to this video, so let's move on to the next secret video, Lucid. This video opens immediately with a shot that gave me a damn heart attack the first time I watched it, where we see the meatball staying fully upright in the doorway before moving into the safe room. We then see... I don't really know what I'm looking at here. Afterwards, we then see what I'm pretty sure is Sebastian Kingsman looking at the dead carriers, where he reveals he likely was living with these survivors, and left when he went feral. After he hears the meatball downstairs, the video ends. Also, curiously, the description of the video says, it roams. Could this be in reference to the meat wall? But that kinda doesn't make much sense to me, because it's been established that the meat wall moves as minimally as possible to conserve energy. Unless maybe when a meat wall gets woken up, they roam around a bit before falling back asleep. Much like the last video, aside from that, there's really not much else to this video. So let's move on to the last secret video, Kingsfield. This video has even less going on in it than the last 2 videos. We're shown Sebastian Kingsman, who we know has been captured by CEDA, before he starts tweaking and the scene changes to a modern-day Mercy Hospital. How do I know this is Mercy Hospital? Oh, I don't know. Just a hunch. But with that, let's get to analyzing this entire installment. So, because this installment is a remake instead of being a completely new installment, there isn't too much for me to analyze in regards to the broken down safe room door or the Whisperer. However, there is a decent bit for me to discuss in regards to all the new sections of the tape. One of these new sections being the soldier clearing out all the carriers from the safe room. Although in the main video there isn't too much for me to discuss outside of what I've already mentioned during the breakdown, there is something that I found to be a bit interesting in the Sergeant video. That of course being Nick's reaction to the dead carrier. See, when Nick looks at this dead carrier, he does a silent sigh, almost like he seems ashamed or disappointed. Or, hell, maybe even both. Though, I'm not too sure why he'd be feeling this way, but I have some theories. Obviously, Nick isn't some unempathetic monster who wouldn't care that him or his team massacred 17 people, but I feel like this is a bit deeper than that. One theory I have is that Nick could be feeling ashamed of the fact that he's essentially become the exact thing he feared in the Parish campaign. Just take a listen to these voice lines.
All right. We're gonna stroll across the bridge, and the army's gonna take care of us.
Or they're gonna line us up against a wall and shoot us.
Well, it's official. They're trying to kill us now.
These ain't zombies. Somebody's been shooting people.
Somebody? Christ, Coach, you know who did this.
This last voice line really drove this point home to me that Nick could be feeling ashamed of him turning into the military guys who are shooting carriers. as if we look at the scene, we can see that the wage soldiers did exactly what Nick was worried the military would do to the survivors at the end of the parish. Though, if we were to go under the assumption that Nick drank the wage Kool-Aid and really doesn't feel bad about being a murderer, then I could also understand why he might be feeling disappointed. He could be trying to think of things more tactically, and was hoping to maybe get as much information out of these carriers as possible before gunning them down, and is feeling disappointed that he wasn't able to get information out of them. Now, the last thing I want to bring up here is a whisperer that came across the dead carriers that were attacked by the meat wall. At first, I thought this whisperer was Dr. Kingsman, as he's the only whisperer we're aware of, but the more I think about it, the less it makes sense to me. We already know that Dr. Kingsman has been captured by CEDA, and almost definitely was in some different location than its breached safe room. Plus, I kinda neglected until now the journal from the special infected tape when reviewing the Lucid video. Initially, I was going to bring up a theory I had that this whisperer and group of carriers were coexisting with each other. Except after looking over entry 2 of the carrier's journal, I realized that the carriers hold as much hostility towards the whisperers as any other infected. So then, why is this whisperer lucid and in this breached safe room? Well, what more than likely happened is either this whisperer heard the commotion going on and ate some of the remains of the dead carriers before becoming lucid, or it lured some chump to it and ate them before wandering into the breached safe room to get supplies. But what do you think? Hopefully in the as of recording this last video in the series, we'll get some answers. So let's move on to the summary tape remake. This tape opens with a man named Alston Galloway sitting at a table with...
Alright, son. I think it's about time we start skipping around the bush.
Oh my god, that is AI-generated Coach voice lines. Okay, generative AI aside, we see Alston at a table with Coach, who isn't wearing any protective gear? Isn't Coach a carrier? Unless Alston is also a carrier, doesn't he run the very high risk of getting infected? As Coach is talking to Alston, we get our first URL in the captions. Normally, I'd save this URL for later, but I want to quickly cover the secret video as it contextualizes things here a bit. This URL takes us to a video titled FG90, where we learn the Coach has been taking experimental medicine that suppresses a green flu virus for 2 hours. Notably, it says this medicine has some issues that haven't been ironed out yet, whatever that means. I'm sure that there will be absolutely zero consequences related to these pills later in the series whatsoever. Also, who's the silhouette behind the text? Yeah, I don't really have any theories about this, so let's move back onto the main video. Here, Coach is grilling Alston on what happened at Liberty Mall, and as he's seeming to remember the attack from Claws, the scene changes to audio from an interview with Malik. May he rest in peace. In this interview, he expresses his anger at David and Xavier for getting themselves game ended, and as he's crashing out, we see black and white photos of David and Xavier's remains, which I had to blur in the last video. As Malik explains his desire to clear out the mall, we get a partial URL in the captions. Although this URL is a bit cryptic, especially with the following text in the captions that say, "The rest lies where he lays," if you remember in Liberty Escape, we saw what was obviously part of a URL, and it fits perfectly into this partial URL, linking us to another secret video. Though, let's save this one for later. After Malik's interview, we see footage of the 20 soldiers arriving at Liberty Mall, before the scene changes to a shot of 2 wage soldiers, labeled Variant A and Variant B, while a message from CEDA to Sergeant Dunkled plays. In this voice message, CEDA is urging Sergeant Dunkled not to go through with the clearing of Liberty Mall, as nobody knows what's inside. As his message plays, we see descriptions of 2 variants of the wage soldiers and the gear they have with them. The scene then changes to a shot of safety precautions for wage soldiers who are carriers, with the background being graffiti that I think says Angels Community Newburgh. While this is on screen, we hear audio from a message from Wage to Sergeant Dunkled, where they seem to hold a different stance on his plans to clear out the mall, just saying to bring enough soldiers and to ignore CEDA's requests if he thinks it's a good idea to clear the mall. As this message plays, the scene then changes to protocols for if a wage soldier gets exposed to the green flu, which I'm pretty sure you already know what that consists of. We then return to the interview with Alston, where he gives a recap of what down at Liberty Mall, where we see the events that led to the attack on the soldiers. And unrelated, I don't know why, but this shot of the starer hiding behind the boxes was just really chilling to me. Something about the way this was shot and framed just felt really off-putting to me. Anyways, as the sequence continues, we finally get to see the stairs interacting with each other. Throughout this whole series, we were told that the stairs have social structures and they're very intelligent, but we've never seen this intelligence or these social structures outside of them attacking people. However, here we see that the stairs are actually smart enough that they can make hand gestures to communicate with other starers. And in this instance, we see the starer making a shushing motion to another starer. After that, the soldiers end up in a hallway, where they encounter Claws. We then see the bloodbath that ensued, before the scene goes back to the interview room with Coach. Before the video ends, we get one last URL. So with that, let's move on to the 2 hidden videos I haven't covered yet, before we move on to my analysis of the installment, starting with priorities. In this video, we see pretty much the exact same thing we did back in Liberty Escape, where Malik got absolutely obliterated by Claws. However, we then see something that's a bit confusing, but also shocking. We see someone hiding behind what was presumed to be Malik's body, as we hear safety protocols for wage soldiers, instructing them to use bodies as protection when attacked by a special infected. So, does this mean this is Malik? Maybe? It's kinda hard to tell. The audio implies that it is, but the appearance of this person and the logic of the situation says otherwise. I'll explain a bit further what I mean in the analysis section. This video finishes with a close-up shot of a man lying beneath the soldier's body. Notably, this man appears to have blood around his eyes. With that, the video ends. So now let's move on to the other secret video, Talk. This video in comparison priorities is not super noteworthy on its own, as its CEDA agent explained to Coach that this failed clearing of Liberty Mall could be what CEDA needs to take control of Operation Extermination. The real noteworthy part of this video is what's in the description, that being a Google Docie. This Google Doc appears to be some sort of declaration by CEDA, reasoning why they should be in charge of Operation Extermination. Interestingly, given the dialogue in the Talk video and the text here, it debunks my theory from earlier where I suggested that CEDA is in charge, as it's very apparent that CEDA since the early weeks of the outbreak have been seen as a complete joke, and are consistently just second in command at best. This document also shows, however, that despite being the more altruistic of the two organizations, CEDA doesn't seem to have the best intentions for wanting to keep carriers alive, implying that they'd be good to use as soldiers thanks to their immunity from symptoms of the green flu, as well as their increased durability. But with that, I think that's all there is to go over from these videos, so let's get to analyzing this installment. Much like the Door remake, because this is a remake of an existing installment, there isn't as much for me to go over in comparison to the other installments. Regardless though, there is a decent amount of new additions to this tape that weren't present in the original video, one of which being Coach interviewing a soldier of the Liberty Mall incident. To me, this section is a bit concerning, since, Coach isn't wearing any protective gear and is relying on some experimental pills to stop him from causing a second green flu outbreak. Like, this is just so risky. I'm calling it right now, these pills are going to be a major plot point down the road. And it's either going to be because someone gets careless with the pills and causes another outbreak, or the previously mentioned quote issues that haven't been ironed out yet. Now, something else I think is worth bringing up is this graffiti here for an organization called Angels Community Newburgh. It's pretty clear that this group is going to hold some significance somewhere down the line, despite not being mentioned so far out of this one image. You see, the reason why I think this is if you remember from the reassign video, Nick is going Newburgh to reason with some carriers, which leads me to believe that the Angels Community in Newburgh are some form of organization of carriers. Plus, the placement of this image really drives home this idea that this is a group of carriers, as it's placed on a slide discussing Wage members who are carriers. Since it's very clear that CEDA and especially Wage have been pretty hostile to carriers, I can only assume that the Angels Community in Newburgh are going to be some sort of resistance for CEDA and Wage. Now, admittedly, I actually do know some info about the Angels Community in Newburgh, as there's a secret third channel to the series, and it was one of the featured channels on the CEDA YouTube channel, but it disappeared, which leads me to believe that's not supposed to be seen yet. So, because I don't want to spoil things, I'll be keeping the details of this third channel to myself for now. Now, something else I wanted to bring up was the reveal of the stairs communicating with each other. I know I mentioned this earlier, but I was really shocked to see them interacting with each other like this. Admittedly, I don't really know what I was expecting when I came to the stairs having social structures. I guess I was sort of expecting them to be like, more animalistic or something. So the fact they're at the very least smart enough to understand hand gestures is pretty freaky. Also unrelated to anything analysis related, but while we're on the sequence, I just gotta say, I am really impressed with how far the animation quality in the series has come. I know I said this in my last video on the series, but it's really crazy how much the series has improved in quality over the years. It really makes me happy to see. But enough glazing, let's go back to the analysis. Now, the last thing I want to bring up is the revelation that Malik is potentially somehow alive. Like, this entire secret video is just really confusing to me. Cause how in the hell could he have possibly have survived this? It's heavily implied they used a dead body to deceive Claus, but like, how? It clearly got a hold of him, and are you seriously expecting me to believe a man getting dragged away by this horrifying beast is able to grab onto a body and use said body to trick it into thinking the body is him? Plus, we know Claus is likely as smart as the stairs, so I'm sure it has object permanence, and didn't just forget about Malik, even if he somehow did manage to grab onto a body. And even if he somehow did do this, it also doesn't explain why he doesn't have his armor on anymore. Like, let's say, by some friggin' miracle, everything I just mentioned went exactly as planned, right? Does this mean Malik took all his armor off, while being dragged away and dressed up a body to look like him. None of this makes any sense to me. Like, so much of this is not making sense to me that there has to be something I'm missing here. Either that, or we'll get an explanation somewhere down the road that'll make things make a lot more sense. But what do you think? Comment down below if you think there's something here that I'm missing. But for now, that's all the series has to offer. I really enjoyed coming back to the series. It makes me so happy to see just how much the series has improved since I last covered it, but also how much this channel has grown in size. As I said earlier, if you haven't already, go show the series and the creator as much love and support as possible. They absolutely deserve it. I'm really curious to know where the series is going to go in the future once the creator finishes all these remakes. Let me know in the comments if you want me to cover the series again when more installments drop. Thank you all so much for watching if you still are, and until next time. Hey, thanks for watching all the way to the end. Since you haven't clicked off yet, I just want to say thank you all so much for bearing with me over this past year. I know my upload schedule is atrocious, but I've been working through a lot of things, both mental and physical, over this past year that's been getting in the way of me making both videos and streams for you all. But now I think I'm in a much better place, and hopefully I'll be able to work on videos at a much faster pace than I had before. Here's to a better 2026. Love you all. Take care.